Rocket ramming. 6. Now we come to the actual ramming of the rockets, and unless you intend to be a great nuisance to your friends and neighbors, you had better not dream of performing this operation indoors, it being productive of much noise and jarring, and you will find that they will not take much interest in your pyrotechnic progress when they have been annoyed and deafened by your frantic efforts for their amusement. You had better choose, therefore, some place either out of doors or in an outhouse, where you are not likely to be interrupted or interfered with. The outhouse, of course, will be preferable, because there you will not be exposed to wind and weather, the former of which especially is often a source of considerable inconvenience when working out of doors. But whatever place you decide upon, you must have a very solid block of some kind, which is better made either of wood or stone, and must be set upon, or let into, solid ground. I should think that you will find no difficulty in meeting with one, made of either of these materials, in any carpenter's or builder's yard. Odd pieces of stone and timber which would answer your purpose may generally be procured for a few pence. The stone block which I use is about 12 by 8 by 8 inches. On your block I recommend you to put nothing but the wooden block into which your spindle is fixed. The composition which you are using should never be placed upon it, because it is sure to become to some extent unmixed by the concussion caused by the blows of your mallet, for the particles of any coarse ingredient which it contains will find their way to the surface. You will find it advisable to have your block, and the table on which your tools and composition are placed, of such a height from the ground that, in working, you need not stoop or put yourself into any uncomfortable attitude. Next, we have to consider what is the most convenient receptacle for your composition while your cases are being filled with it. I use a copper scoop capable of holding about 8 ounces of composition, made something like an open coal scuttle in form, which I have always found very convenient, and which is represented in the annexed woodcut, figure 17. You will next require a small ladle made of thin copper or brass, of such a size that it will take up just as much composition as you should put into your case, at a time, and will admit of being passed into the case. By means of this you will be able to drive in the composition very uniformly, for by giving a certain number of blows of a certain power to each ladleful, you can be sure of an equal compression throughout the length of the case. Such a ladle Mr. Newman will supply with your rocket tools, of the right size for filling quarter-pound cases. I will now suppose you to be ready at the ramming block, with all your tools about you, your composition ready, and your case driven firmly down over your spindle. I strongly recommend a slight moistening of the composition as directed above before you begin to ram it. Now, taking the longest of the drifts, figure 13, in your left hand, insert into the case when the first ladleful of composition has been put in. You are not to suppose that by a ladleful I mean as much composition as can be heaped up upon the ladle or scoop, but as much as will lie within it after you have passed the drift over its surface, and have levelled the composition to the height of its sides. To this first ladleful of composition give 14 blows with the mallet. It is not necessary to exert much force in this operation, for the weight of the mallet will be nearly enough to do the work for you, and you will find that after each stroke the mallet will recoil with the blow to a point almost high enough to be the starting point for the next stroke. Having given the proper number of blows, take another ladleful of composition, and when you have put it into the case, drive it down in the same manner as the former one with the same number of blows. Then for your third ladleful, take the longest drift but one, which must be used for this and the following ladleful, giving to each of them 16 blows. Then take the shortest hollow drift, and use this for as many ladlefuls as will make the composition rise to the top of the steel spindle, giving 18 blows to each of them. Then, by inserting the short, solid drift, you will be able to measure the distance between the top of the spindle and the top of the case. When you have taken this measurement, make a mark on the outside of the case, which will show you how high the spindle rises on the inside. By adopting this plan, or any other that may occur to you as simple, you will always be able to ram the same quantity of solid composition above the spindle. This is really an important matter, and one on which depends mainly the beauty of your rocket's performance when it reaches its greatest elevation in the air. There are great varieties of opinion as to what should be the quantity of composition rammed solid above the spindle, and it is a much more common matter to find too little than too much composition used for this purpose. The effect of using too little is that the rocket does not fairly arrive at its turn before its stars or other decorations are thrown out. This, in my opinion, is a considerable fault, for it robs the rocket of a great deal of the elegance of its flight, and gives one the idea that it is in a hurry to get its work over. Nothing but actual experience and observation will enable anyone to decide which he considers the proper quantity of solid composition. I consider the best length for this part of the rocket to be that of the exterior diameter of the case. That is, an inch or rather more for rockets of the quarter-pound size. Larger rockets, I have always found, do not require quite so much in proportion. Smaller rockets, rather more. You should give 20 blows with the mallet to each ladleful of this solid composition. I am well aware that this number of blows sounds like a great deal of hard work, but you may rest assured that these 20 blows, given as I have directed above, will occupy only 5 or 6 seconds of time, at the cost of very little exertion. Having now completed the ramming of the composition into your case, you will next require some common potter's clay in dry powder. This can be procured of Mr. Darby, in a condition proper for use. Take half a ladleful of it, and ram it down very hard upon the top of the composition with the solid drift. This clay, when thus compressed, will form an end to your rocket nearly as hard as stone. Not so hard, however, but that you can bore a hole through it about 5/16 of an inch in diameter, which will allow of the necessary connection between the rammed composition and the stars or other contents of the head of your rocket. In the next place, I will speak of the priming. This may be done in 2 ways. For exhibition purposes, I should merely put into the mouth of the rocket some meal powder paste, made as follows. Make a rather soft, but not too liquid paste, by moistening meal powder with gum water made of the strength of 2 ounces of gum arabic to a pint of water. With the flattened end of a stick, rub some of this paste into the cup formed at the choked end of the rocket, taking care that none of it is left in the choke, or narrow aperture at which the fire from the rocket has to find vent. For if any should remain there, The rocket, when fired, is almost certain to burst. Any of the paste that happens to be forced into this aperture may easily be taken out afterwards by means of a piece of wire or stout pin. Your rocket is now finished as far as its ascending power is concerned.